Hey everybody, the purpose of this video is if you've chosen the Excel route in our project, we're going to do a little Excel tutorial on how to set up this annuity problem, and we're going to learn some new tricks that we've already done a couple times in Excel now, dragging formulas and doing what are called relative references. Today we're going to learn something called an absolute reference, which is actually a super useful one, and you'll see why and how you need it as we go through this video. So let's get started. This is what when you open the spreadsheet that's attached to the project. Make sure you get the second one. The first one was for my student loan problem. This is for Pop-Up's annuity problem. It's going to look like this. You've got years from 0 down through 20, and then you've got all these blank cells over here. We're going to fill those in with formulas and then numbers as the formulas auto-populate. So the first thing we want to do is we want to remember that Pop-Up wants to put $500. So type 500 in cell G3, $500. And if I remember correctly, it was a 6% annuity rate that he got on that annuity, which is, again, I mentioned earlier, that's crazy how high that is. Nobody gets that anymore. He's had it for, well, Max is going to be 12 as I record this, so it's been a while since he was able to get that rate. It's before the economy imploded back in 2009. So anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to take these numbers and we're going to fill in this column right here. So the first thing we're going to do is in year 0, we want to put that $500 in. Now we can easily just type $500 and press enter, and you can do that if you want to. You can also type equals and then click on the 500 and do that. I think it makes more sense to do that way, and I'll show you why later. But it has to do with the fact that if you want this to be dynamic, you don't want to have any fixed values in it. You want to have formula values. So that way if you change something over here, it'll update over here too. I like setting up my my accounting kind of things that way. Have the fixed values in one place that update over here. Okay, so now here comes the interesting part. What we then want to do is, in the next year down, we got to think about what's going on here. What's going to happen is, the first thing that's going to happen is, we're going to take 6% of this amount, add that to this amount, and then Pop-Pop's going to put $500 in the bank account. Okay, so what we're going to do is to break through this again. This is why nobody talks about annuities in most math classes, because if you try to do these by hand, it's a nightmare. You're going to take this amount, you take 6% of that amount, add that to this amount, and then Pop-Pop puts an additional $500 in. That's what makes it the annuity, the constant adding of the $500. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to type this as a formula, equals. Now, to make the math fairly simple, follow me here. I'm going to type parentheses, 1 plus, click on that 6%. So it says 1 plus H3. I'll explain that in a second. Right parentheses, times, then click on that cell above, and then type plus that cell. Okay, I'm going to let that sit there for a second so that you can kind of take a look at it, because there's a lot going on in that formula. I want to make sure it makes sense. So 1 plus H3, that's kind of fancy schmancy, but all that means is take 1 of this amount and then add to it this percent of this amount. It's like 106% of the original amount, which is how savings accounts work. You get more money out than you started with. And then the last thing is plus G3. So you press enter, and that shows that he has now, after a year, $1,030 in the account. Now let's make sure that that makes sense. That should make sense, because he has the original $500. He adds 6% to that. 6% of 500 is $30. Convince yourself that's true. So that's $530, and then he adds another 500 onto that. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Now the nice thing about this is, we're going to create an error and then fix that error. We can copy this formula down, but watch what happens when you do. When you copy it down, you start getting these weird error messages like, what the hell is this? This doesn't make any sense. And why would this be the same as it was the year before? Okay, and I'm going to show you why that happened. Click in this cell here, And you'll notice when you look at the formula, it now says 1 plus H4. H4 is this blank space underneath. And then click back in this cell. C4 is where we want it to be. We want that to be C4 for sure. But then what's G4? G4 is this blank space. So in other words, Excel got lost when here we took the 500 bucks and we added it here, and we took that 6% and we put it right there. But when we copied it down, it made all the index numbers go up by 1, which is exactly what it's supposed to do. But you don't want it to do that for H4 or G4 in this case. You don't want that. You want those to stay fixed in H4 and G4. So what you're going to do is we're going to undo everything we just did. We're going to go back to the formula that we had up here. Okay, just so you know, that undo thing I did, I hit Control Z twice and it took us back to this formula. We are going to take these references out. Well, actually C3 we're going to leave, but H3 and G3, we are going to take them from being relative references to being absolute references. And here's how you do that. Here's the easiest way I've found. Highlight H3 and press the F4 button on your keyboard. Now, this might not work on some computers. You might have to actually manually type in those, see those dollar signs, $H, $3, and then select G3 and do the same thing. Press the F4 button. Again, you might have to type dollar signs in front. Those are called absolute references now. Press enter. Notice it's still $1,030, but watch what happens when you drag this down. Aha! The dollar amounts keep getting larger as you go down, which is exactly what you would think. Now I want you to see what happens here. 1,030. If you click into the next cell, look what happened to the formula. Watch this formula as I click back and forth. Notice that 2 of those references are staying the same and 1 is moving. That's exactly what you want. You want the 1 plus H3 to always be 1 plus that H3. And you want the plus G3 to always be plus that G3. But you want the amount in the account to change every year, which is why that works when you drag it down. And there you go. That's what you needed to know right there. He's going to have about that's just about 20,000 bucks. If you want to get it down to the nearest dollar, it's $19,996, but it's just about 20,000 bucks. Now, what's so cool about this is you can then change the numbers over here. And you can say, okay, let's say if he puts 600 bucks in instead of that. Well, that's going to go up to about 24,000 bucks. Or if he's able to put 1,000 bucks in, then it comes into this. What's even cooler about this, and I'm not going to get into it too much, is suppose for some reason he decides to put different amounts in each year. Like suppose after the first 10 years he wants to then put 1,000 bucks in, maybe 2,000 bucks instead of 1,000. You can add another cell over here and then change the formula from here down and replicate that. You can also see the impact of changing interest rates. You can make it 5%, or you can make it 10%. No, 10% you're not going to get, but you can say that the economy takes a hit and it's only 2% now. So what's so cool about this is you can edit just about everything in this sheet by simply changing these values right here. Making sense so far? Okay. Now, the only thing I wanted to do past this, and this you've now answered the question that I asked you in the project, which was how much money is in the account at the end. So if you've had enough, that's totally fine. You can be done right now and you can turn the video off and you can answer that question and everything's fine. I'm going to go a little bit further. So by all means, like I said, turn the video off if you're done. What I want to show you is what happens if you don't do an annuity, but you do just a normal compounding interest account where you take, a chunk of money and throw it in a bank account and then apply a compounding rate to it. So let's just assume we get the same 6% compounding rate, and let's say we throw 2,000 bucks in the compounding account. Okay, so watch what we're going to do. I'm going to kind of replicate what we did before, but it's a much simpler formula. I'm going to take that 2,000 bucks in the beginning. Now watch this. I'm going to watch the slight difference. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm taking 106% of that 2,000, but I'm going to make this H6 absolute, just like I did before with the other one. Okay, and the reason I'm doing that, remember why I'm doing that, because now when I drag it, it keeps that interest rate going all the way down. Now look at that. I put 4 times as much money up there as I did in the beginning. And then when I span it out, it doesn't have anywhere near the amount that this one has. Now, some of you are going to say, well, of course it doesn't have anywhere near. You ended up putting $500 in multiple times. Absolutely correct. But what's amazing is how much money you can put in this and still not have the same amount you have here. Now, you can make it, what's kind of fun about this table is you can actually make it so that you can figure out what amount you'd have to put in order for them to match. And it's right around $6,400, it looks like. So 6,400, roughly 6,350 or something like that. If you put that in at 6%, after 20 years, you'll have the same exact amount. But what's going to be easier, right, friends? Is it easier to put a little bit of money in each time? Or is it easier to put a chunk of money in once and then forget about it? I think we know the answer to that one. And what's kind of fun is I added this extra column over here, which now that I'm looking at, I'm going to go ahead and delete. I don't really need that one. I was going to say the extra interest. That was just a subtraction. But really the point of this was really these columns B and C. I wanted you to see how the annuity works. The math of them, you've chosen the Excel version. I personally agree that that's the easier of the two, algebraic or Excel. So thank you for joining me on this little journey, and we'll talk to you in class.